Jeff, I hate the way that you just cut that like that. So, hey everybody, John Newman here, and welcome to episode number 12 of Welcome to the Machine. And today's episode, I don't want to, it's nothing about any other guest, but when I saw the story about today's guest and her family, and I don't cry, but I literally was almost brought to tears. And so Hope Brookins, your family, and if you all haven't seen the video, I think there's you're one of 50 million views, 30 million views.
Yeah. We have one Facebook video that has 30 million views and lots of others with tens of millions of views too.
So I almost feel like I don't need to introduce you because if they don't know who you are or haven't heard the story, they must not be on the internet. They must not have a computer. But anyway, Hope's family, and I'm going to just let her tell the story because I will not do it justice, basically built a house watching YouTube videos. And a single mom and her kids built a house, and I'm in real estate, so this is really, really cool. Watching YouTube videos, and there's a amazing story behind it, and it's the kind of story that everyone needs to be a part of because it shows triumph and overcoming adversities, and I'm just excited. I'm just so thankful you're here, Hope.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show. First of all, Jeff, I thought the intro was great. Great music choice.
Really weird. Just stop.
Such cool music, though. I love it. It's definitely the best YouTube video intro that I've ever seen for a show. So I was impressed, definitely.
All right. Well, then, Jeff, keep it going then.
Just too hard on him. No, but yeah, you did a pretty good job of telling my family's story. So it's crazy because it almost feels like another lifetime ago. It was almost a decade ago when my family left a really traumatic domestic violence situation and decided that the best option financially was to build our own house. And to do that, we could afford to buy the supplies, the materials, and the land, but we couldn't afford a construction crew or workers. So at least not for most of the work. So my mom at the time, I was 17, this was a decade ago, decided that we would just be the construction crew when we built it and that we would figure out how to do it. And YouTube videos were something that we relied heavily on to make it all happen. So within 9 months, we built a 3,500 square foot house right outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. And when I say we, I mean my mother, myself at age 17, my brother at 15 and 16, my sister at 11, and my youngest brother at 2. So with a single mom and 4 kids, we built our own house.
And and Hope, the story behind this is just it that's what really touched me, because not that you did it, but it's like there's a whole story behind why it was important. And you and I had a conversation, and I lost my mom, and you talked about how your mom was very artistic and creative, and she could build things. But building a house, how would you even come up with that idea? Like what would make someone think that it's even possible? Because when it comes to limiting beliefs, anyone that's in business or entrepreneurship or life, we always have these beliefs that things aren't possible for us. Clearly, your mom and you guys didn't have that.
My family almost has the opposite problem. We believe that anything is possible, even if it is so beyond our resources and our talents and our capabilities. And that means that all of us dream a little bit too big and are known to jump into really big things that most people would never dream of taking on. So it sounds crazy big, but it can get us into some trouble.
Oh, I can imagine that.
Like when you're 2 weeks into building a house and you're still working on the foundation, or really 2 months into building a house and you're still working on the concrete block foundation, which would take a real construction crew about 2 to 3 days.
If you see people walking by, and Hope, first I apologize for this, and thankful for you. Like, my son is getting inducted to the National Junior Honor Society tonight, so that's why we're doing it during the day. We usually during the evening. So I've got people walking by that have no idea that we're doing this right now. So hopefully they all have clothes on.
I thought I should wave. No, that's so exciting. I was in the National Junior Honor Society back in my day, so I know what a big deal that is.
Yeah, it was. And my daughter, who was adopted, who's from Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
Last year, she was inducted. So now I have both kids that are in the National Junior Honor Society. So I'm a proud dad, which is
you have
weird
the bumper sticker? Not yet. They're going to sell it to you soon.
My wife will definitely have the bumper sticker. I'm not a bumper sticker kind of guy because, like most people that know me, I'm not a huge believer in the education system as it exists today.
Right.
Which is weird because I'm still very proud that my kids are in the National Junior Honor Society. I think it comes back to just applying themselves to an objective and accomplishing a goal.
Right.
Walk me through your story because you have a fascinating, you didn't just go to high school and say, I'm going to be a builder. You actually, have a background and you've done some really cool things. So kind of walk me through your journey because it's really fascinating that the house was built 10 years ago, but this story just went viral like in the last several months.
Yeah.
So how does that happen?
Well, where to start? I'll kind of take you back to what I've gone through career-wise and then how that's brought me to right now and the story going viral this year. So we have a lot of hours, right? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So around the time that we were starting to explore the option of building our house, like I said, we were leaving this traumatic domestic violence situation. And while no domestic violence was inflicted on me, I had to watch my mother go through this. And as a 17-year-old girl who likes to be in control, I felt so out of control. And there was nothing that I could do. So I was looking for every way to take action and to regain some sort of control over my life. So right before we started building the house, I started to get involved in local politics because it was a way for me to do something bigger than myself and to see this hopeful community of people talking about really good, positive things. And then simultaneously at the same time, we started building the house, which gave me a ton of control and a literal physical action that I could take and then see something very slowly rising out of that action, something being a house. And those two things combined, getting involved in politics and then building the house, really enabled me to regain power and control over my life. And after the house was finished and that piece in our history was done, I continued to be active in politics. And months after we finished building the house, by the time I was 19, I had worked for a former president of the United States, Bill Clinton, 14 United States congressmen and politicians at literally every level of government in Arkansas, from constitutional officers to local mayoral races. So I dived right into that. And after a few years of politics, about 6 or 7 into my career, I decided that my real passion was not political campaigning or fundraising, and definitely not government work. So I slowly learned about the online world and started to transition the skills that I had developed running political campaigns and fundraisers to building personalities and public figures from entrepreneurs and authors. And I'm slowly starting to work with politicians again, but more from a branding space and a publicity space.
Which they need. I mean,
yes. Everyone who's a personality needs that help. But yeah, politicians, entrepreneurs, authors, they especially need it.
And that's become, really one of your specialties, personal branding. And, I'm 45 years old. So it sounds weird, but that's like relatively new. Like that term, your personal brand,
right, is
something that I really just kind of heard about in the last 2 years. I'm showing my age here, but
well,
now everyone wants a personal brand. How does someone develop a personal brand?
Well, I think we used to call personal branding reputation.
Okay.
And that it's essentially the same thing. Personal branding is how you're perceived. The main difference between when we called it your reputation and now that we're calling it personal branding is the fact that now people are doing a lot more to control and can do a lot more to control their personal image with the internet, with social media, when they're able to easily build a following and easily build a platform where they can share their message. So
So,
that's the big difference now.
and do you believe that that's necessary for everybody? Meaning
I,
that, my kids are 12 and 12 at this point in time, which is interesting. But yeah, they're 12 and 12. And part of me says, as a father, business person, you need to start building your personal brand now at 12 years old, because then by the time you're 20, you've already assembled, who you are, your followers. And it almost seems like in society today, the person who has the most followers wins. Like if you have,
yeah,
which takes me back to when I was in high school or school, if you had a lot of friends, you were the popular person. And it sounds like it's the same now. Like,
your network is your net worth. And in a society where there's just more and more globalization, and you're now not only competing with the people who live in the same neighborhood or the same town or city as you, you're literally competing with the world, especially since the workplace is transitioning to more and more contract positions to where people are having to sell themselves as opposed to selling themselves as an employee. They're selling themselves as a business. I think it's essential. And my brother, who was 2 when we built the house, is now an 11-year-old, and he has a personal brand. He has a website, though he doesn't have very much content on it. He has about 50,000 followers on Twitter. And he regularly does. Just last week, there was a product that he really wanted for some videos that he's doing. So we taught him how to write a proposal. He sent a proposal to the company, and they sent him this digital animation drawing board that he really wanted for free so that he would promote it. So do I think that everyone should have a personal brand? Absolutely. I think that some people may not have the need to develop it as much or to grow as big of a following, particularly if they want to go into the more traditional workplace. But I still think that they have to think about themselves as a brand and that they should see everything that they do through the lens of a personal brand.
well, I think you're exactly right. Even if you go and you're pursuing employment, not self-employed necessarily, the first thing I do when I look at applicants for opportunities is I look them up Facebook, Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like that 30-second intro that I sneak from that. I'm going to make a judgment on them just from that glance review.
Right. And I've had lots of people reach out to me who are in the more traditional workforce, and ask me just literally about their LinkedIns and how they can better uh, encapsulate what they do on their LinkedIn header. Not even the content, not even their resume pieces, but literally just the titles that they're using. Because when it comes to your brand and your personal brand, that level of messaging is essential. And there's a reason that even though my LinkedIn says I'm self-employed and that I run a business, that I get frequent recruiters reaching out to me offering me jobs. And it's because of positioning through branding.
Wow. So walk me through, because you do this for clients, walk me through what you would do for a 45-year-old husband and father of 3 people. Like, how does that start? How would one start by figuring that out?
Right. So the first thing that I do is I identify what phase someone is at. And people usually come to me in one of 5 phases. And phase 1 is literally someone who knows that they need a personal brand, but they don't yet know what they want to be known for. And if we skip to level 3 or phase 3, those are people who know what they want to be known for. Maybe they could use a little bit more clarity around it. And they know exactly what kind of brand extensions they want. Maybe they've already started a radio show or are already writing a book that's almost ready to publish, or they've just published a book. And then they're phase fives who are more like my mom, who are well known, who have a lot of press, who have a lot of brand extensions, but still can use further help in developing their clarity. So I'd put you at like a level 3, 3.5 to 4. So you're someone who I feel like you have a pretty good idea of what you want to be known for and your message and what you have to offer the world as your value proposition. So with a client like you, instead of focusing as much on branding foundations, I would focus a little bit on messaging and then move pretty quickly into getting publicity and really positioning your brand for press.
So do you do that through like a network? Because this is new to me. Through like a network of people, like, okay, I know people, I can help position you in front of other people.
Well, the approach is so different because if you think of the difference between working with a politician and working with, say, an entrepreneur who's specializing in marketing, or I have another entrepreneur that I've worked with who specializes in more of the financial mindset space. These people do not need the same features. They don't need the same blog post. So I like to think of myself as someone who stalks basically anyone and everything that moves online so that I can quickly help people in very different fields at least start to determine appropriate placement, whether it's blogs to be featured on with large influencers, whether it's podcast or Facebook shows that make sense for them, then moving into bigger, more traditional media or online-based publications like Forbes and Entrepreneur to see what's a good fit.
Very cool. How has, and I'm like, go back to the house. How has that changed? I mean, I know it's had an impact on your life because just from me stalking you, like you're all over the place now. No, like, how has that changed your life and your mom's life and your siblings' lives?
Well, in so many ways, but I think the biggest way, like I said, we started off with this belief that we could do anything. And I think that into my adult life, that slowly things happen, marriages don't work out or almost happen. And business is hard and you start a new business and you don't know what you're doing. And I think that for me, I had slowly started to lose that idea that I could do anything. And I was thinking small again.
Why? Just from
being a grown-up is hard. I think that, you know, with this millennial generation, you're growing up and you realize, okay, yeah, it was nice to think I could do anything, but real life can slap you in the face sometimes. And I think that it was so shocking this January when my family went viral and we were literally featured within over 1,000 media outlets in more than 65 countries around the world in 2 weeks. And that level of press then continued for 3.5 months to the extent where I had to manage the publicity campaign full time and not do any client work. I had to take that time off. And when you're receiving that level of international press attention, as well as offers from production companies for TV shows and feature films, anything really does feel possible in life. I like to say that we thought really big and we wanted this to be a big campaign when the launch of my mom's book, which is why this went viral 10 years later, when that happened this January, I had been working on this for about 2 years to brand the family and to really position us to take this level of publicity campaign. But I could have never even imagined going this viral. To me, before this experience, going viral was a really good BuzzFeed post that landed you on Good Morning America. Mm-hmm. I don't think that most people can imagine or understand 3.5 solid months of press 24/7 or what a viral publicity campaign is actually like. I mean, most people look at a Facebook video and say, oh, that has 30 million likes, it went viral. Well, multiply that by thousands and thousands of things that all have that many views and likes around the world. And it's still just hard to even comprehend sometimes.
And I'm sure that there are a lot of people that look at a marketing campaign or a viral video and they're thinking, wow, it would be nice to be them, but they don't see the amount of work, the amount of you're having interviews, you're responding to Facebook comments. They don't see the work that goes behind that. They just see that, wow, this video had 30 million views. They don't see, I mean, I'm sure that there are times when you were working 16, 18-hour days just trying to manage everything.
Well, what people don't understand is that I worked 16, 18-hour days for 2 years leading up to this. I spent about 6 to 8 hours a day with doing client work that would actually bring in revenue and money. And then I spent the rest of my time figuring out how to position my family in this way, and then taking the actions that positioned us in this way, from building websites to building our social media following to learning the skills necessary to manage this level of publicity campaign. Now, I had a lot of experience in this from politics, from having a degree in political science, but this was definitely at a different level, and definitely a little bit different than going and doing something in politics. So yeah, I was already used to working that many hours a day, but when we went viral, it was working more like 20 hours a day. And if I was lucky, and even when I wasn't working, just trying to keep up with some of the features, it's such a shocking experience to be scrolling through Facebook and see a story about yourself pop up in the New York Times Women's Edition or BuzzFeed. And there's so many stories that happen in a scenario like this that are just written about you, that you don't interview for, that you don't know are happening. And it's crazy overwhelming. Sorry, I hit my microphone there. For all these people to be talking about you and know your story too. It's definitely freeing at the same time though.
So for you, I can imagine it was somewhat, and this is just me thinking, somewhat easier. What was it like for your mom and your brothers? So you had a background in publicity, so you were kind of used to that. Was your mom and your siblings prepared for this?
So like I said, when I say that we've been preparing for this for 2 years, there are multiple times, more than I can count on my hands, that the whole family has sat down and practiced. What would we say if asked these questions? Now, we didn't do anything near the kind of preparation that we would have done had we known what would actually happen. If we were just thinking about maybe 1 or 2 interviews, we could have never imagined anything of this extent. And but we had all been prepping for this for years. And my mother has been speaking at conferences for years and as a public speaker for years. So she was certainly prepared and able to jump into things. But I don't think that most people, other than a very few select politicians or celebrities, ever go through anything at this level. And if they do, they first of all aren't managing it themselves from their home.
Right.
And they usually have a real team of professionals. They aren't DIYing it themselves. So I think that was a big difference. And it usually wouldn't continue for the length of time that it continued for my family. It would be a more instant week or two and then go back to normal, just from what I observe on the news and having worked with politicians where maybe there's a scandal here or something. So I definitely think that the length and the fact that we were DIYing it made things a little bit different.
You use the word normal. What is normal now in your world? What does normal look like?
That's a subject that my family talks about a lot now. And the first thing that we usually say when we use the word normal is we are so not normal, and we just wish that there was a little bit more normalcy in our lives, but know that with the type of ambitions that we have, there isn't. And when we're trying to decide between a movie deal and reality TV, at what point is your life just too far from normal to ever go back? So
is there ever a time when you all sat down and you said, okay, has there ever been a period where we really didn't want all of this? Has that ever?
Well, about a year and a half before we went viral, we had actually, through someone who contacted me, filmed a sizzle reel for a reality show. And when that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Is this seriously my new plan in life, to have a reality show? Clearly, I've lost it. And that day I applied. I was working for myself and I applied for about 20 jobs. And I was like, I'm clearly no longer here anymore if I think that's my future. And But after that point and coming back from that, which was a week-long breakdown, or at least 48 hours, I've been pretty focused on making this happen and on wanting this to happen. And there have been multiple times where my mom has sat everyone down and I've sat everyone down and said, "Are you sure? This is what this lifestyle looks like. Are you sure?" So everyone keeps saying yes.
But the story though, and I want to make sure that anyone's watching this understands, this came out of adversity. It wasn't, okay, let's figure out how we can manipulate or anything. This came out of pain and adversity, and then it was like, oh wow, this is a really cool story.
Right. So when we were building the house, we didn't even tell many people because we were embarrassed. We were in such a bad situation in terms of family and finances that it's like we're so poor we have to build our own house. I mean, as a teenager, that's embarrassing. And I mean, we would have never back then, it would have been hilarious had we even thought of this.
Right.
Because again, there were a few family friends who came and saw us building the house or tried to help and then realized, yeah, that's not happening. What can I really do to help them build a house? But no, we could have never imagined this. And we certainly weren't planning for it because it was something we were embarrassed of. And it honestly, I think my mom slowly started to talk about it when she went to writers' conferences and she wrote fiction books, the kids' historical fiction book and time traveling stuff. So somehow her story slowly started to come out just in dinner conversation. And as she shared it more and the stigma kind of died down and she would tell me how fascinated people were, I started sharing it too. I liked attention and I loved it. It was a great story to tell friends and, but it wasn't something, there's so many political contacts that I had for all of those years. And most of the people in politics that knew me were shocked when this story even came out because they never knew. Because
and
it was something
thinking like, why wouldn't you, if you needed help or something, but I can see that.
Right. Like, I was trying to go dressed up in a cocktail party and raise thousands of dollars for politicians. It would not have fit the story that I was trying to tell or the image that I was trying to project at that time.
And I think that just goes to, there's so many people that, I air all of my dirty laundry out because it's my laundry and I'm proud of my dirty laundry. But what I've found is that the more open and transparent I am with struggles I've gone through, the more impactful I can be in helping another person. And I think that's exactly what, it's almost like, okay, I don't want to tell people about this because it's not something that I really want to advertise that. But when you can break through that,
right,
it's like, wow, you can really touch people and impact people in a big way.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this idea that people say, but you don't really realize is that you have no idea what other people are going through. And I'm sure at the time people looked at me and thought, I have a 17-year-old with this perfect life, 18, 19, super involved in politics, doing lots of cool things. But they didn't understand that I was going straight home from school to a quick political job to working on a house until 1 a.m. I literally would drive I had a Chevy Blazer that I would drive to school and it was caked in dirt and the back was filled with construction tools. I was always afraid I was going to get suspended from school for having saws and things that could seriously hurt people in the back of my car because I was such a rule follower. And I would step out of my car in a cute skirt and heels and pearls and no one would have ever imagined that my car, that the inside actually looked like that everything was caked in a thin layer of dust and you just don't know what people are going through. And it certainly has made me be more transparent. And I was always somebody who wanted to present a polished and perfect image. And I certainly have realized the power of sharing your story and the power of sharing your struggles because everyone has them, even if they're different. And I do have a rule that I don't believe in sharing them until you've fully processed them.
Tell me more.
We weren't ready to talk about building the house while we were doing it. we were still two there. And I don't know if it would have been as positive of a thing. I think that it was something that we had to get through first. And I continue to feel that way with things that happen in life. And I want to share my struggles. And I believe in sharing my struggles, but I believe that they're most helpful to share when I'm in a place where I've overcome them. So that I'm overcoming them without, it's hard to put your struggles out there. And if you just put them out there, I think that people have a lot to gain from it when they can see the full story.
Right.
And until that story's over, for me, I'm not usually ready to share them. Now, obviously, if we end up going this reality TV route and things like that, I might not have that much control over my life anymore. But that's been my rule. And I've heard that rule from a lot of influencers in the online space. And I think that it's a really good thing, and it's something that makes people a lot more comfortable with sharing their struggles, because sometimes when you're going through something, you can't speak about it in a composed way when you haven't processed it, and then it doesn't help people in the same way.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between airing your dirty laundry just for the sake of airing your dirty laundry versus here's what I went through, here's what I did to overcome this, and then here's where I am now and what I've learned from that process.
Yeah, because when you have a conclusion, it gives people hope in a different way, even if you're not all the way through your story. I don't think anybody's ever all the way through a story, but being to the next stage, at least, I think you need to be there before you can talk about it and before you're truly ready to share it, so that it's no longer, so that you can separate the emotion from it and instead use it as a way to help people, not as a way to help yourself. Because if you're still in it, I think sometimes it can still be people want to try to help you get through it, and it's no longer a tool that you're able to use to help other people get through it.
Yeah, that is beautiful, because now when I think back with what you all went through, if you were discussing that in the open, yeah, you would have had people maybe, hey, we'll come over and help. But it wouldn't have had the same impact. The story wouldn't be the same.
Or it could have been people saying, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, you can't do this.
Right.
So there's also the discouraging comments. And I think that those are more dangerous and more likely for people going through something that just aren't helpful.
That makes perfect sense. Did you have any negative publicity?
There's one article that I won't mention that literally one that I've read that I was like, seriously? that they were definitely misleading during the interview process about other sources that they would be interviewing. But they actually reached back out to us and wanted to do a following more pieces. And we're like, no, but it wasn't even a real, I don't mean this in a mean way. It wasn't a real news source. And I'm not saying that I don't trust that source politically. It was a blog for an association. So my lips are sealed anymore.
And sometimes, when you're willing to put yourself out there, there's always somebody out there that's going to, they'll take and we see it in politics all the time. They take a snippet of information, they twist it a different way, and they try and spin it a different way. And I mean, I get people, it happens. But when you're clear on what your mission is, whatever, like, who cares?
I think the thing that was most shocking to us was how positive everything was. And we certainly imagined more things that weren't as positive. I mean, there's definitely some controversy to the story, and we were shocked at how overwhelmingly positive not only the people, but even the comments are. Now, if you scroll down some of those Facebook videos, especially the more viral ones where there are tens of thousands of comments, there are definitely some trolls and some mean comments and some haters and some doubters. But what's even more amazing is that there are people who are complete strangers who defend us, who say, yeah, she actually did. Here's a link, and they'll cite other articles or sources. This answers your question if you could just Google. So it's been really neat. Obviously, we haven't had time to sit down and read through tons of comments, but we've snuck in a few, and there are a few that we like to tease each other about, whether it's a girl, my brother, who's 24 now, likes to look for girls saying he's cute. That's his favorite activity in the comment section. And we all like to find one or two to tease my mom with, whether it's blaming her for child labor or asking her out on a date. We like to tease her with those. So we look at it as all fun. She did a Facebook Live on her page one night. I think it's Jimmy Fallon style, who does those mean tweets.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So she did a Facebook Live like that one night after my prompting. So it's crazy. It's crazy when you read a Reddit feed about yourself. You know?
Yeah. And then you're trying to, well, it's crazy seeing yourself on camera. And I can't imagine the level of press that you have. Because and sometimes it can feel a little bit intrusive, I guess.
Especially since it was all at our house.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted to come because we built the house. So when the Today Show wanted to do a segment, they didn't want to fly us to New York. They wanted to come to our house for a day and film. And having so many press and media in our house, and we did a docu, I'm trying to think what to call it. Basically a super short mini documentary with Google and YouTube. And they flew out a big film crew from New York, 16 plus people to the house for days to film long 16-hour days filming. It basically was practice for filming what it would be like to film a reality show, because it's very much in your house, in your life. It's so interesting to see and understand how it's done.
I mean, when you went through this, how long did it take to build the house, Hope?
9 months. We had a 9-month construction loan, so there was a real deadline.
9 months. And like your youngest sibling, like what did they do? Just help carry her? I mean, like, I'm just trying to envision.
At the time, my youngest sibling was 2. So basically at all times, someone had to, on the job site, whoever needed a break was assigned to him to watch him so he didn't die or something, you know? But even Jada at 11, when I think of when we first started building the foundation, which involves those big concrete cinder blocks, the big gray ones, we had to stack 1,500 of those around the house and then cement them down. And we didn't have water installed yet because we were the plumbers and we didn't know how to tap into the city line. And it involved pickaxing a ditch almost an acre to lead pipes up to the house. And my mom wasn't mentally ready to do that yet. So we actually carried 5-gallon buckets of water from the neighbor's pond, which he lives, I'm not good with distance, but I mean, it's almost an acre away. So, I mean, my youngest sibling, Jada, at 11, was putting the mortar on the concrete blocks while me and my brother carried 5-gallon buckets of water to my mom, who hand mixed concrete in a wheelbarrow because we didn't have electricity for the concrete mixer, or it was broken already. I can't remember. So, I mean, and Roman, the 2-year-old at the time, was just walking around, everyone trying to make sure he didn't get squashed or, you know, walk too deep into the freezing pond, because this was in January. So everybody had a role, and Roman was the 2-year-old was the entertainment. And even when we were framing the house, my 11-year-old sister obviously wasn't around or allowed around nail guns. So she would measure pieces of scrap 2x4s, write the length on them so that if there was something we needed for a window or to frame something else, that we could quickly look at those and reuse them, because we also were trying to be really efficient with supplies to save money. So there's so many little bitty things like that all add up.
And you know, the crazy thing is there, and this goes to the foundation of a family. And you know, there are families where, you know, we get into arguments about things, and this story kind of says, really, guys, like, we're going to get in an argument over who can play the Xbox when you could be out here doing this. And this is why I love this story, because
now we still get in those arguments.
But at that point,
but it's different now.
House, it's like your problems were a completely different level of problem.
Right. And there wasn't as much argument then because it was such a big goal that had to be completed and that we all understood how serious it was that there wasn't time for arguing. I think me and my siblings understood, me and my brother, who was 16 at the time, understood the importance of finishing the house on time, but I don't think we really knew. I mean, I'm not sure now that even my mom knows what the implications would have been financially if we didn't finish the house in 9 months with the bank loan. I don't know what that looks like. That's something we never talked about because it was just we had to finish the house by then.
So, and once again, just to take this 9-month process, and even some of the things that you went through that led up to building the house, that's a lifetime of lessons learned in that short time frame. What were the biggest lessons that you would say your youngest sibling learned? Like what did they walk away from going through this process?
Yeah, so the really interesting thing about Roman, who was 2 at the time, and how he has seen the world is that he genuinely believes that there are no limits and that you can do anything, and especially that you can build anything. And basically, if Roman watches a tutorial on YouTube with my 2-year-old brother, who's now 11, he believes that he can repeat it. Whether it's drawing some sort of Vincent van Gogh masterpiece instantly after one video, or melting metal in the backyard to create some sort of sword, he believes that it can be done and that it should be done instantly. And it's crazy to see someone who has no limits on what they can do. And it's a different way. And I mean, we all obviously started to feel more that way after building the house. But seeing somebody who literally was raised with that's all he can ever remember. And he grew up knowing that he helped build this house. I mean, it's hard to truly believe that anything is possible more than that.
Wow.
And to not see differences between what men and women can do, because it erased all gender roles from his life. If his mom and brother can both use a nail gun equally, there are no limits to what women can do either. And that's a really interesting, different thing too.
Well, I can imagine that this will be interesting when he's in his 20s and if he decides to get married one day. And
if we haven't scared him off.
My mom built a house. Why can't you build a house?
Right.
So you truly can the feeling within you is like, whatever I want to do, I can do. I don't need someone else.
Yeah. And it's not being afraid of failure, which it can be kind of bad because I don't think that fear is erased ever completely, but I think it's looking at the idea of failure in a different way. And the question that my mom always asked that we would roll our eyes at, that I still roll my eyes at sometimes when she says it, is what's the worst thing that could happen? And if the worst thing that could happen is that you would fall off the roof, then don't do it. Right? Sometimes that question meant, no, you can't proceed. But usually that question was like, the worst thing that happens is that we drop the wall off the second story of the house and we have to rebuild it because nobody's down there. And that's the same thing now with putting our story out there. If the worst thing that can happen with putting your story out there is somebody can talk bad about it and it can hurt your feelings, then it's still worth doing. Yeah. So that's a huge lesson from my mom, which I'm sure she'd love to know I shared.
Your mom, and I haven't spoken with your mom, but she must be like an amazing person.
Mm-hmm.
Through what she went through, and then to take on this type of project, it just speaks volumes to her, and I'm sure it's even with each of you now, because you got to see it.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to like tear up a little bit. What was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome, obstacle while you're going through this?
Just believing that we could build a house. I mean, the first day that we started building, we realized we were way, way, way in over our heads. And there's something that makes you believe that you can do something as crazy as build a house, and that's being really naive, and that's not knowing what's fully involved. And I think that's the reason that people start businesses, because if they knew what was involved, truly, they might not as many people would probably start businesses. Maybe nobody would start a business, because sometimes you have to go into something a little bit blindly in order to be able to pursue it. And with each new step, you learn more and more about what you don't know. And I think that was the biggest struggle, is realizing really quickly and every day more and more how much we didn't know. But my mom did a great job of faking it completely and making stuff up as if she did know what she was talking about. So I think that helped with all of our confidence. But it was definitely a stage where we realized mommy doesn't know what she's talking about. Not always. I think that's an age in life when you finally realize that your mother isn't perfect and that she's not a super mom. She doesn't know everything. And I think as adults, we all start to realize that you don't know, that grown-ups don't know everything. No. And that at 17, and I'm sure my siblings too, started realizing then that you see humans in general in a different way. And we're all the same. We're just different ages and we have different experiences, but you don't ever magically have all of the answers.
No, and that's really part of the reason for Jeff, and because this podcast wasn't my idea. I didn't know what a podcast was. This was Jeff's idea. And I'm just a fool that has no problem being on camera. But what I've found is just by talking to people is how much I don't know. And that's what I love. Like the more people I talk to and the more stories that I hear, the more I realize how small my world is, number one. And like, wow, literally I can learn something from every single person. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And I love it when people are sharing that, because we're now exposing to it's like collectively we're increasing everyone's knowledge base. If they choose to listen, if they choose not, shame on them. And that's what I think is so cool about podcasts. When you have guests that come from different backgrounds that can just share a nugget, 2 nuggets, 3 nuggets that will impact someone for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've learned I could not run a business without podcast, without YouTube. I think that the way that we used YouTube to build our house, that I really used podcast and YouTube to build my business, much in the same DIY way, because that mindset really translated that I don't need a degree in construction. I don't need a degree in business to do this. If I can build a house using YouTube, I can build a business using YouTube. So, and podcast. So I think that same mindset definitely applies for me.
Now, what advice because there are a lot of people that believe they have limiting beliefs, and they believe that I had a conversation with someone today, and their limiting belief was, I want to do something that's going to involve putting me in front of a camera, but I'm not comfortable being in front of a camera. And my suggestion was just do it. You'll fail forward. You might make an idiot of yourself, but who cares?
Neither was I love that you use that specifically, because neither was my mom. My mom was mortified if she had to be the center of attention at her own baby shower and had to open gifts in front of 10 people. She was one of the most shy people that I've ever seen. And just last weekend, she was speaking on stage to like 8,000 people. She's spoken on, she's been live on the Hallmark Channel now and on the Today Show and done CNN, all sorts of interviews. So I think that anyone can learn anything if they want to learn it. And you might never be the best at it, but you can learn it enough to be good at it. And do it in your own way.
If you just remove your own ego and you're okay with failing.
You have to not be afraid to be embarrassed. And that's something we realized quickly when we were building the house and going into Lowe's and Home Depot, asking people, so if you were going to do this, exactly how would you do this? And when you're doing something this big, when you're doing anything, even little things, and you don't know what you're doing, or even if you have had training in something, there's always going to be something that you don't know or that you could do better. And I think that if you're just not embarrassed to ask, then this comes up in a really funny way for me because I remember sitting in a college course and it was like my basic biology class, which was a giant lecture full of 125 students. And no one ever would dare to raise their hand and ask if they didn't understand something. But science was not my thing. So I had lots of questions. And anytime I had a question, I would just raise my hand and ask because I wasn't embarrassed to admit that I didn't understand what the heck the nucleus had to do with this whole thing. And if you're not embarrassed to ask, you learn things. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, and that's said in a negative way sometimes, but you can't learn something if you're just trying to prevent yourself from being embarrassed. And that's not a way to live life, to stay out of embarrassment. It's so much more powerful to show that you are a human and to show that you don't know everything, and it makes you relatable.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation with some staff members last week, and it was about asking questions. And I said, what concerns me is when people don't ask questions. Like, bombard me with questions because at least that tells me that you know that you don't know everything and you're seeking advice from someone that has already done it before you. When you don't ask questions, I'm really concerned.
I agree completely. And I've worked with employers or as a contractor with people in the past. And I say the same thing with contractors that work with me now as when I'm the employer. And I completely agree.
Yeah. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead, Hope.
No, asking questions just shows a sign of basic understanding and a sign of basic comprehension that you know enough to even know what questions to ask. Because sometimes when people aren't asking questions, that's why.
Yeah, and then sometimes people will preface a question by saying, this might be a stupid question. And my comeback for that is the only stupid question is the one that wasn't asked. Like, there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Yes. Agree 100%.
Because
if you don't know the answer, you're stupid to not know it. You certainly aren't going to figure it out if you don't ask. Right. Now, today we have the ability to Google things.
Yes.
But so there's this weird fine line now between should I send somebody a let me Google that for you link and should I ask the question? But it's so often in Facebook groups too, people ask questions that seem really basic or really dumb. And it's like, well, why don't they just Google that? But I understand because there's a different level of trust when you can see people that you know or people who are in your community answering that question for you. Mm-hmm. And in a way that's specifically targeted towards you and what you want to do. So
as you went through this whole entire process, Hope, did you learn anything about yourself? Like was there any point in time where you became really self-aware? Because I think that's something that's missing. There's a lot of chatter about self-awareness and how important it is. Did you become more aware of yourself and who you were as a person through this?
Yeah, I think that I've always been a pretty self-aware person and that I've never been afraid to be different. But I think that there's a certain level of empowerment that comes along with this idea that you can do anything and this feeling that you can do anything because you start to understand in a different way that the only thing that's stopping you is you. And when you become aware of that, it can be a hard thing to become aware of. And being aware of it in and of itself isn't necessarily enough to get over it.
Right.
But I think that's the biggest thing in learning how to, when I wake up in the morning, sometimes with business projects, and I'm just thinking, what am I doing? What have I done to my life? I'm able to do the self-talk in a different way, to talk myself off of it, so to speak, and say, you know exactly what you're doing, you know what your plan is. You just have to focus. And I definitely think that that's something that came out of this for me.
Are you ever frazzled? Because even like right now, you just seem like Very, very, and this wasn't scripted, but you seem so polished. Like we've had this conversation before. Are there ever times where you feel like you don't have it all together?
Yeah, my
Like,
family would laugh at that question. I like to think that I always have a plan, and I do always have a plan. Now, life doesn't always go according to plan, and things don't all, sometimes plans have to be shifted or rewritten. So basically, whenever I'm frazzled, it's because a plan has not worked out and I'm in the process of rewriting it or remaking my list. But as soon as I have my new list or my new life plan, I'm usually right back on track. But I think my whole family would tell you that when we're prepping for live TV at the house, that there's nothing polished about me. That's why I do think that TV would be fun sometimes, because that's something that I don't really, it's hard to present that online in a Facebook Live or something, but I think that something like that could be captured differently with cameras following you around than it could when you're editing yourself on Facebook Live or something.
Yeah, 100%. Were you the type of person that you would take charge of the, like?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Everything. My whole life. I've always without a doubt been more of the boss than my mom. And even as a kid, driving home from the grocery store with the whole family, I would be like, okay, when we get home, Mommy, you're going to do this. Drew, Jada, you're going to do this. And Roman, you're going to do this. And I'm going to do this. And I always have had a plan. And I've always loved that structure and order. So I've kind of imposed it on the rest of my family.
Even though it's not their natural tendency, probably.
No, I think my mom's a little bit of a planner, but it's hard to compete with this level of planning, probably. The rest of my family is much more go with the flow, other than my now 11-year-old brother, who is also a planner, who also likes that structure and organization.
Hey, Hope, and Jeff is typically viewing comments as they come in. But I'm going to make an announcement really quick. If anybody has any questions for Hope, are you okay with answering any questions?
I will, like I said, I'm open book. Tell all. I'll answer anything. Nothing can shock me anymore.
All right, no marriage proposals or anything like that, guys.
I don't know. I'll take them at this point. Like I said, I'm open to anything.
All right. While we wait for this, right now, and this goes back to just being very polished, put together, what is the biggest challenge you're currently facing?
Trying to do everything, because I want to do it all. So for me, the biggest challenge is I've separated business steps into phases, and phase 1 is focusing on one-on-one programs. Phase 2 is e-courses, and only allowing myself to work on one thing at a time, on one phase at a time, is so hard, because it's almost like that shiny object syndrome. But I want to create my keynote speech, and I want to create these corporate training programs, but only letting myself do one thing at a time is so difficult.
So what do you do to try and,
combat that? Right. So that's why I've been really purposeful about creating phases, and each phase has 1 or 2 distinct things. And until I'm completely done with phase 1, I'm not allowed to move on to phase 2. And that has really, really helped me focus, and also know that it's okay that I'm not working on XYZ yet, because that's phase 5, and I know that it will get taken care of once I get there.
Okay. Do you use any planning tools or?
Yes. I'm obsessed with Asana, and it's ASANA. It's free. They have some paid features. I don't use any of those currently, but they work really well if you're working with a team. And it's an app on your phone or the computer. I usually use it more on my computer, unless I just think of something to add when I'm out and about. And I literally have everything from almost a vision board there to my daily schedule outlined by hour, from when I wake up into the morning until when I go to sleep at night. And I'm flexible on that. If I decide to go out with friends for dinner, I can easily delete a few tasks and replace that with dinner. But I schedule in social activities there too. I use it for long term to write out my phases, to break down into separate projects. It is where my whole life is.
Is it almost like a project management tool?
It is a project management tool.
Okay.
So that's how I manage my life. like lots of big projects.
But then you can break them down into bite-sized chunks.
Yes. So that it's not overwhelming. And I love to-do list. And Asana is basically has two different options of how you can display your content or your objectives. And that's through list and basically checklist-based list, and almost a Pinterest kind of image-based thing, more like Trello, which I don't know if you're familiar with. And I haven't used that as much other than for my vision board because I'm such a checklist person, but I love it.
Okay, and that's Asana, Asana.
Yep, and you'll be addicted to it too. So.
Well, I mean, for me, it's always been about something. I keep like these notepads, and I'm slowly transitioning to something on my phone, but finding something that can pull everything together, because I like to doodle, I like to write things down, and to bring that together into one platform so that I can have my to-do list, my calendar, my long-term projects, different business ideas in one platform.
The newest iPad has some sort of program like that you literally can combine handwritten notes that can be searched by keyword with your calendar, all of that. So for me, it's Asana, and I use Google Calendar too. And I do have to manually bring over any of my appointments from Google Calendar to Asana, which is kind of a pain in the way that I write out my daily schedule. But it works really well for me. And I've used everything. I've used Basecamp. I've used Trello. I've used so many different things with different teams that I've worked with. And nothing has ever worked as well for a team or for me individually as Asana. And I make boards for my family. I put chores. It didn't work. They're not list-based people, but I tried. And I use it sometimes with my mom, but I literally have tried to put chores on there or helping them prep for different photo shoots that we've done, because it's a lot for me to pick out everyone's outfits and iron them all. And I've used it to map out everything from coordinating wardrobes to like, you need to sweep the floor before this magazine comes. But like I said, my siblings, it ended up being a place where I was able to manage their activities, but I was still the one who had to check them off. So
now do you manage your siblings like PR personal brand? It sounds like a crazy question, but I mean,
they would say I do. So when it came down to videos and photo shoots, during the time when we were going really viral, and even still now, even when we were having photo shoots for the book a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I've always been the one who styles everyone's outfits and who coordinates appearances.
Wow. How do you have time to have fun or anything?
You know, unfortunately, I haven't had a ton of fun the last few years. I've focused a lot on business, on my family, and on positioning us. And I've turned down some really big opportunities for that, but it's all been worth it. And this has almost become my fun, doing interviews, doing all of this stuff. But I do take at least one day a week off to hang out with my girlfriend or go out on dates and all of those fun things. So I'm slowly scheduling it in again, but it was 24/7 publicity for the first 4 months of this year for sure.
And I think there's I'm a huge Gary Vaynerchuk fan.
Oh, me too.
The grind that he talks about, like, that's what you're saying. Like, you all had a mission, and you sacrificed, having fun, relationships, all these other things, because you were on a bigger mission.
Right. And if you try to, I mean, we did the same thing when we were building the house. My mom did the same thing in order to get a 6-figure book deal from a publisher. You can't accomplish those kind of goals unless you have either a lot of money and you can buy your way in, or you're willing to make the sacrifices to get there. And I think that I grew up like that, seeing sacrifice in that way and seeing, okay, we have to finish the house in 9 months. This is our social life. This is it. This is the only thing we get to do. And that might not be the healthiest thing, but it has allowed me to accomplish really big things that I wouldn't be able to accomplish at 26 years old if I weren't willing to make those sacrifices.
Yeah. And I think I think that you have to be really, really passionate about some things in order to have that. I get asked this question today, like what wakes you up in the morning? And I get asked that question all the time. And for me, it's a spiritual journey. So it's for me, like I wake up because God gave me a purpose and it's my job to fulfill that purpose every day. Like I can't so that's mine. I don't have it's money or anything else. What is it that you're most passionate about? Like what drives you? What makes Hope get up every morning? And
such a deep question. I've never thought about it in that way. I think that my why has always been helping people be seen by other people, by society, the way that they want to be seen. Ooh. And what it comes down to for me is helping other people. And because when I'm able to help other people be seen the way they want to be seen, they can then share their message. And it's something that has been consistent in any work that I've ever done, from politics to branding to publicity. It's the same message. It's the same central idea of helping people share their message and turn it into a movement.
I love that. All right. Did you write that down? Okay. I love that. Our demographics are typically between the ages of 18 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
So
millennials, basically.
Yeah. But I would say in some ways you're an older millennial, not from age standpoint, but just from the amount of experiences that you've been through. So what advice would you give to an 18 to 30-year-old about life?
Well, I'm also kind of an old person in general. I mean, I was baking cookies this afternoon, and one of my favorite hobbies is quilting. So I really am kind of an 80-year-old woman at heart, too. Like, I've never liked to go out. I've always preferred, like, boring cocktail parties where there's a piano player or a harp player in the corner, not a crazy cool clever bar. So I'm really old on the inside, too. But
quilting, huh?
I've been sewing since age 1 by hand and since age 6 by machine. So I'm a pretty talented seamstress too, not to brag. But for millennials, I would say the biggest thing, and I'm going to steal this from Gary B, but I'm not going to say it as explicitly, is right now is your time to build a foundation for the rest of your life. And you're never going to be in the position where you feel able to take the kind of risk that you can right now, whether it's financially, whether it's career-wise, whether it's travel-wise. You're going to be married, you're going to have kids, you're going to have more serious life commitments that don't allow you to take these risks and take the risk and make the sacrifices, whether it's the sacrifice of living with 6 other people so that you can afford to travel the world or start a business, or it's the sacrifice of not necessarily having the fun that you want to have so that you can be super financially stable by the time you're 30. Right now is the time to make those sacrifices.
Yeah. And I think I would 100%, being a little bit older, 100% agree with that. It gets progressively much more difficult, not in terms of, well, let's say life is never easy. Life never gets easy. If anyone thinks that, when I turn 30 or 40, it's going to be easy, you're crazy, because that doesn't happen. Life has a way of throwing you curveballs just when you think you have it figured out, just to keep you on your toes. But I wish, looking back, that I had made more sacrifices in my 20s. I played a lot, and in hindsight, I wish I would have done less playing and more doing. Because time flies so fast. When I was 20, I was thinking, 40 is a long time from now. Looking back, it was like that. It was
right.
I mean, it's crazy.
And you just get more and more commitments in life and more responsibilities. I'm learning when this whole adulting thing. So being able to be more prepared for those and to have more time as you get older and more flexibility. I mean, that's been the biggest thing for me, is I have the flexibility. And because I run my own consulting business, that I don't have to I mean, most people can't just up and run a publicity campaign for 3 or 4 months and not generate any revenue during that time from their business. So that's definitely something that I was able to do because of the other sacrifices that I've made. But that in and of itself was the sacrifice that I've now been able to leverage to charge clients a lot more than I was charging before. So it just all keeps building on top of each other. And I know that I'm already more positioned to have the lifestyle that I want. And the more that I work, the closer that I get to achieving the freedom kind of lifestyle that I want.
Are there any books that you're reading right now, and I'm not sure if you're a big reader or not, or that has impacted you in a big way?
See, most of the books I read are completely business-based or branding-based. I think that probably one of the most relevant ones to suggest today, based on our conversation. Now, I have to say this, I'm going to give you the name and the author, but first I have to say that the author has said some not so nice things about millennials. So I'm hesitant. I had wanted to throw his book away. It doesn't bad talk millennials, but he's said some not good, nice things about millennials. So I'm kind of angry at him now, but regardless, it's a great book. And I think that it plays a lot into our conversation today, and that's Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
I know you were going there.
But we're disregarding everything he said about millennials because it's not true.
So let's I love that you said, as soon as you said it was a good book and he said something, I knew exactly where you're going. Where do you believe that his thesis was flawed?
So to be clear, I mean, basically what he was saying about millennials was what everybody says about millennials, and they were entitled, etc. And this wasn't in the book, his book. This has just been publicly when he's spoken about millennials. And everything was flawed. Millennials are entitled. I don't think millennials are much different than any other generation, other than the fact that I think we're more resourceful. I think that we're more caring about the environment and socially issues. If anything, I think that the ways that millennials are different than older generations, no offense, older generations, is that millennials are better. So I disagree with everything he said. And I would say the same thing about Generation Z. They're incredible. And each generation seems to, again, no offense to older generations, but each generation seems to improve and become just better and better people as we have more resources and more access to technology in the world as a whole, because each generation is able to have globalization impacts them more, and they're able to be and see themselves within the world as a whole in a different way and from a younger age.
Yeah, he talked about in that, and I think you're referring, there was a video that was put out.
Oh, yes.
He talked about how they don't know how to communicate and they can't go down, have a dinner conversation without having their phones in their hand, which I'm very guilty of that at times. I will admit it. I look at it and say, because I'm a huge advocate for millennials, huge, because they're I'm somewhat of an intelligent person. You guys are the future of my life. Like,
right.
You will dominate business, industry, finances, everything. So I better understand what you're thinking, because that helps me in every business that I own to position itself for you guys. So if you think millennials or you don't understand them and you're in business, you better take some time to understand them. And that's where Gary Vee is 100% right on. Like, he is right on the money.
And I think the biggest thing with millennials that really, if I had to boil it down to one thing that separates us, is that we're one of the first generations that we're focused on happiness. We're focused on experience more than money, more than financial stability. And I think with so many of us growing up during this recession back in the day for us, that impacted us, and it showed us that money wasn't everything, and that even if money isn't there, you can still focus on experience. And that's why millennials spend more money on travel and experience-based activities than stuff. And I don't know if they necessarily spend more money, but that's why they value those things more and place a different emphasis on those things. And that extends to their experience in the workplace. What makes corporations angry is that millennials would rather work a job where they get paid less, but where they're doing something good, and where the office culture is one where there's free food and happiness. Right. That's more important to them, that overall experience, than making money.
And that's where, so even the older generations than what I'm in, that's where the disconnect is, because they grew up in a time where you went and you got a good job and you looked forward to a pension one day. So right. They look at millennials as being lazy because they want to travel 4 months out of the year. When actually, no, they actually have it figured out. They have it figured out that it's about being happy. It's about living a fulfilled life. And if that means that I'm not working 60 hours a week, I'm okay with that. And to an older generation, like, what do you mean? Because I hear that a lot. They don't know how to work hard. No, they want to have a balanced life because they understand. They see so many. I see so many people that are quote unquote retired that are miserable. Right. Miserable. Their sole life was defined by a career or a job that they have. And when that was removed from them, they have no sense of who they are.
Yeah.
Now they're miserable.
And I think that's why so many millennials have said, screw it to traditional corporate work, and why there are so many startups. And why, when you look at Silicon Valley, and there's age discrimination there, proven without a doubt, millennials want to bring in other millennials who have the same mindset, who are going to continue to cultivate an environment that's based around those principles. And even me running my own business, I have this flexibility to create a lifestyle still now that I want, where I can start later in the day when I'm going to be a happier, nicer person. And I can take a break and cook fresh lunch every day.
And cookies.
Even if that, right, and bake cookies in the middle of the day, even if that means I'm going to work an extra 3 hours at night to make up for that time. It's more about, instead of trying to get through an 8-hour workday and pack all this stuff into 8 hours, I spread it out over the whole day, and I work a lot more than 8 hours. But in between, I'm doing things that are enhancing my life experience. For me, a lot of times that's cooking. A lot of times that's laying out in the sun for 30 minutes and reading a book. And having a great day overall, where there's happiness throughout the day, and I'm not rushing. I'm not literally just waiting until my workday is over, but instead it's this overall experience, is the way I want to live. Even if it does absolutely mean way more work, but I would rather do way more work that I enjoy and make less money. Or, I think I can make more money, but make less money than I could at a traditional job. I make more money than I did at my old job. So that's a plus, but or my last 9 to 5. But even if I made less money, I would rather make less money and have this lifestyle.
Yeah. And it's, I don't want to call it mentor, but I guess I mentor a lot of young adults, and I preach this thing about retirement's a myth, and the idea of working and then having a 401k so that you can one day retire is just hogwash, because I lived that. Like, my mom was trying to live that life, and then she never got to see that retirement thing.
The same thing happened with my grandmother.
Yeah, it's a facade. It was created back in the days when we wanted you to work in factories, and we needed you to work long hours for 40 years because it was beneficial to the
employers. Yeah.
Employer. So that's why it was all created. It was created to keep you employed so that we can produce stuff. The funny thing was, she graduated from college, went and took a job with a government agency. Let's just leave it at that. And they had a workshop on financial planning. And in the financial planning workshop, the person says, so you're going to work here for 40 years, and then you're going to retire and live a very happy life. And she was like, I can't believe that they actually said that. And when I questioned it, everybody looked at me like I was weird. Like when she actually spoke up and said, well, what happens if I don't live to be 55 years old? And everyone looked at her very strange. So and that's where the disconnect is.
Right. Like why? It's the same idea of even just looking at an 8-hour workday. Like, why are you being miserable for 8 hours when you could at least be happier doing something that you like for those 8 hours, just to have another good 6 hours at home before you go to sleep?
Right.
It's not worth pushing through all of that time and extend that, instead of being 8 hours a day, extend it to like 40 years, like you just said. It's not worth it. And millennials have realized that, and the older generations don't like that. And the workplace is definitely adapting to it slowly, but surely, I think.
Where do you think, just from a branding standpoint, from corporate America, where are they missing the boat? Like, where do you think they have to evolve to?
They have to put a greater focus on workplace experience. And whether that means literally bringing people like me in to train their workforce on personal branding and in helping their employees with self-improvement activities, ordering that lunch every day or once a week or once a month, and just focusing on creating a happy office culture and creating a mission-oriented work environment, even if you're doing something or selling something that's boring. I absolutely think that you can create an environment where millennials want to work if you invest. And it's not even necessarily extra money that has to be spent. It's management choices, it's messaging choices. And it all comes down to branding the company, and the branding that you have on the inside is even more important than your external brand, because that inner office culture and whether it's happy is going to be reflected in the rest of your brand.
And if you,
right, like if you think of Costco, that's the first example that comes to mind. They pay their employees fairly. They all make, I think, a minimum of $40,000 a year, again, I know that's a huge difference in Arkansas and California. And maybe in some places it's $60,000 a year for Costco. I may have that number confused, but they're consistently talked about as one of the best places to work. When you look at and other similar competitors to Costco, let's not name any names, but people aren't as happy to work there. And it's all about this environment that they're creating. And another example is Starbucks. They're helping their employees pay for college with scholarships. And I'm sure that along with that comes with flexibility needed to attend classes, as that being one of their priorities. And sometimes it does mean spending more money, but sometimes it just means offering training opportunities so that people can invest in themselves more or grow. Mm-hmm. Promoting managers who not necessarily are millennials, but who just are focused on happiness. It's not complicated, and there's no reason to overcomplicate it. It's just being a good person, but being a good company. It's the same concept. It's not complicated.
Yeah, it's actually taking an interest in your employees for who they are as a person, not as an employee, but as a person, and helping them develop their journey of life.
Yep. It's what you can do for them, not just what they can do for you, without a doubt.
Right. Hope, we're going to wrap up soon. So I have one last question for you. Mm-hmm. And we ask this of everybody. This is all about a journey towards fulfillment. So, which for millennials, it should hit it's funny. Those are the questions I always get. I don't get questions about business as much as how do I find my why? So when we talk about fulfillment, which means different things to different people, what does that mean for you?
I think it goes back to the idea of living every day the way I want to live it. It's not this journey I think it was a journey for me to get here, but I don't think it's a journey anymore, because I think I already have fulfillment. I think so to me, fulfillment looks like spending your days the way you want to spend them, Now, not every minute is fun. I don't always love answering emails or filling things out, but overall, getting to do what you want.
I love that. What can the audience or what can anybody do for you or for your family? Is there anything that anybody can do for you guys?
Well, we always love to have new friends on Twitter. So you can follow all of us on Twitter. I'm at Hope Brookins, and my family is I'm always retweeting them. So you can pretty easily find them on my Twitter. And we love having new friends there because that's where we hang out a lot.
Is that the easiest way to reach you, Hope? On
Yeah,
Twitter?
they can always join me on my website too. That's hopebrookins.com, and you can contact me there. I've got a contact form and my email address is up there. It's just hope@hopebrookins.com is my email address, and I'm pretty accessible. I'm not always the quickest at answering emails, but I answer them all. So
And for anyone that is interested in building their personal brand, clearly you've shown results of how this can happen.
Yep.
How would they contact you for inquiries about that?
Yeah, again, that's just hope@hopebrookins.com, and they can see some of my specific packages there. Right now, I work mainly one-on-one with people, but excitingly, over the next few months during phase 2, I will be launching a lot of automated programs that are at a really affordable price point so that more people can get my personal branding philosophy.
Awesome. And shoot, I forgot my last question now. I had one last question. I forgot what it was. Brain freeze.
So no marriage proposals in the Facebook Live. I'm just forever hopeless.
I actually have someone sitting next to me that is raising his hand.
I love it.
Hey, Brenton, you want to come? No. He might be a little. No, he's 24.
Too funny. Hey, we'll have to talk after this. No, I'm just kidding.
Now, see, it's
so
funny.
He's
funny. A millennial, and I've known Brendan since he was 16. We're going way off topic here, but this is fun.
What was that last question?
I don't remember. We were now talking about marriage proposals.
So funny. I've had some fun interviews today. Everybody who I've talked to today has been so much more fun than normal. I have to start stalking out more people like you.
Well, no, I have no idea what I'm doing, so that's probably fun. This is not rehearsed, and literally this is my 12th podcast. I didn't know what a podcast was. But hey, I'm just willing to put myself out there because I believe that there's enough messages around the world that need to be shared, and the more people share them, the better off we are as people in a country. So
totally agree.
That's my mission. I want to chat more, with the way with every guest, this is our network becomes bigger. The more people that we get on and the more people that I meet, the more people that you meet. And I can't wait to have you on again. I want to have you on again. And because following your journey is fascinating. And
thank you.
We're going to do this again. If that's
okay.
Yeah,
for sure. Like I said, it was a blast and I am back anytime.
All right. Thank you so much.
Awesome. We'll have a great afternoon.
And if I'm in Arkansas, I'm coming to see you guys.
You totally can have a tour. I'll make you some chicken and dumplings if you like Southern food. We'll see. Chocolate chip cookies, whatever. We'll figure it out.
I love chocolate chip cookies.
Perfect.
That's my kryptonite. Chocolate chip cookies. and my wife loves to quilt. I call her old all the time, but she knit.
Perfect.
She does that all the time.
So funny.
You're awesome, funny. Hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll have a great afternoon, and I can't wait to watch this on Facebook.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.